kind of kick it off, I'm delighted to have Ken with us. Ken, obviously, I've given you a little bit of a brief, but our focus this week in our kind of Masters in Sports Journalism group is kind of looking at the wider bracket of sports analysis writing and everything that kind of falls into it. And I do think that Ken commands quite a spot in that bracket in Irish journalism. While we will, of course, touch upon his kind of broadcasting and podcasting career and the expertise there, we are particularly kind of interested in Ken's writing career today. I think something that strikes me the most about Ken's work down the years, this is back when I was sports editor at the Mail and Ken was writing for the Irish Examiner back then, and all the way right up. And I've been abroad, I've been home, but I've always kind of caught up with his work, is you almost always come away from reading one of Ken's pieces having learned something. And whether it be about a specific player or a moment, a team or a coach, or just an entire bloody sport, you come away kind of thinking differently about things. And look, along the way, you're going to learn something new about something that's entirely has nothing to do with sports at all. It could be Greek mythology or German-Franco relations, lines from The Sopranos, or just some general kind of Fairview smart arsery. But I think in an age when news media is focusing closer and closer on the type of content that convinces readers to kind of pony up for a subscription, I think it's fair to say that certainly for me and for others, as you can tell every Monday at the Irish Times, quite often he's behind the paywall. Ken's writing has always kind of struck me as something that is very much worth paying for. So look, I think anyone who listens to Second Captains will know that conversation tends to flow pretty easily. Hopefully it'll be no different today. And I know the group probably have a bunch of questions. I thought I'd just kind of get us off and go. And I think I used a particularly, excuse the French, but wanky phrase, kind of like your writing journey or something when I was texting you last week. So we won't go with writing journey, but I do think given the surroundings and given the environment, it does make sense for us to kind of maybe start at university as a starting point.
Yeah.
If you could tell us briefly about where you went from getting from university and your path into media and regular writing.
Well, I went to Trinity, where I did not a huge amount of writing. I did English in Trinity, and which I did TSM with psychology. And I guess I was supposed to probably do a lot more reading and writing than I actually did, because in common, I think, I don't know. At the time, I didn't really do a lot of work in college. I mean, it was not unusual to be like that. The year that I went to college was 1996, which I think was also the first year that they had free fees.
Right.
So really no generation ever had it easier, just in terms of the progression of things. You're coming into university, you're it's for the first time, you don't even have to pay. As long as you didn't fail a year, you were you could go all the way through. And then the economy when we were finished in 2000 was very easy compared to now. So it's just, when I think about it now, my God, I didn't realize just how easy it really was. But in terms of getting into doing journalism, that happened basically by accident, because I met Gerard Gilroy. Gerard Gilroy from News Talk.
Yeah.
I remember meeting him the day I did my final exam in college. Wow. And basically said to him, what am I going to do? I don't know what I'm going to do. And he was like, why don't you come and, I'm working for this crowd, Setanta, who had a website at that stage. Even the website was quite, it's kind of out there. Why do you have a website? That kind of thing. Yeah. And so I basically just went in there and started working there, and then kind of continued from there. And the reason I knew Gerrard, though, was he was a little bit ahead of me in college, but I knew him through the student publications.
Right.
So I got involved in those, first of all, by going along and writing a couple of film reviews or whatever for Trinity News or this kind of thing. And then I started editing a magazine called Miscellany, which is kind of a I don't know. I mean, it was about like politics and things like this, but like not very local. Like it was kind of, it was just like articles about stuff like by students. Like most of them were terrible. The worst one in the entire, Leo Varadkar wrote us a couple of articles. One of them I remember was when he was Leo Eric Varadkar then, and he wrote an interview with not Bernard Manning. Bernard Ingham was the guy. He was Margaret Thatcher's press secretary.
Yeah.
That was one of the. I remember he wrote that. Who else? I can't remember. These are sort of famous people. I wrote definitely the worst article that appeared in it in my time there, which is an article all about how Amazon.com was it was not a wise investment. Like I think it's literally the worst. It's the worst article anyone has ever written about anything. Just if I had, instead of writing that article, just gone and like bought £10 worth of Amazon stock at that point, I would be like seriously quite a rich guy. So I was like, this is nonsense. Like people are, who wouldn't rather go to the bookshop than like buy books off this stupid website? I mean, the thing is that I was actually right in the extreme short term, because at the time it was overpriced. And it's sort of there was like the .com boom was on then. This would have been like 1999 at some stage.
Right.
And I was right. And the price collapsed, but it's now like it was like a speed bump that the price went over, and now the price is like sort of at the top of sort of Everest kind of thing, so just to put it in perspective. But you don't always get everything right. Like, I mean, it's good that I got my worst ever article out of the way. I got an early point.
Yeah, I had a question way further down on your worst piece of sports analysis, but I think
God, well, I mean, there's too many of those like to remember. I mean, I think that's definitely just the worst piece of analysis, possibly of like the 90s in Ireland. But what can you do?
Quite a competitive field. I saw a quote you gave kind of, and I think it was when you were kind of talking about transitioning to Off the Ball, and when the show bumped up to 3 hours, and that was obviously kind of still enough at an early stage of your career, fair to say, like.
I mean, that was 2004, so yeah, like the beginning of 2004, so yeah.
So by that stage, you had moved to Off the Ball, and at this stage, you were writing for the Examiner already, or no?
No, I did. The first people I was writing for, I didn't really write anything. I wrote some for Setanta.com. I wrote there. I went to like the World Cup in 2002, and I wrote stuff on their website, but under a pseudonym for some weird reason. Oh yeah, because I was working for another company at the time. I was working for a company called InTrade, which was like InTrade was this company that started up in 2001. So myself and Gerard had been working for Setanta, but then this new company came along and like poached Gerard. Then like a couple of weeks later, he was like, "Oh, like, do you want to come and work here again?" So we were kind of following each other around. Well, I was following him. These guys were like, they were basically like a Betfair type entity. They were launching at the same time as Betfair. Wow. And they were a similar type of idea, like sports trading, but there's like they were started by a couple of like New York traders, and like their whole kind of language for talking about it was based on like the language of the New York Stock Exchange, and like in terms of like it would be a contract, like the bet. It wouldn't be like they wouldn't talk about it in terms of a bet. It'd be like it's a contract that fluctuates. It goes between 0 and 100. Like 0 means you've lost, 100 means you've won, and all the prices in between reflect the probability of the bet coming out. The way the odds go up and down on Betfair. I mean, at this time, this was like a totally new, like no one had done this before, because there hadn't been this capacity sort of bet in real time online before. So they were a startup. They had tons of money. They were targeted at extreme high rollers like city traders, London and New York, sort of like probably a subscriber base of like 3,000 people. Like these people had just so much money and they were gambling so much that it was going to work out. Anyway, I think that was like August 2001 was the big launch, and then like moments later, some things happened in New York which changed the whole kind of culture. It sort of changed the September 11th thing had a big effect on that particular business. A lot of the people were from New York, like new people who it created this massive sudden economic uncertainty, for a company that had raised a lot of money and then had kind of done its money and then like hadn't got any results. Like, I mean, the all the traders at this time, it was probably the worst time in history to try to get a bunch of traders together to gamble. Was that like 3 or 4 month period when they really needed the traders to do that? Everyone was being, it was a different time. So that company wasn't really going so well. So I was like, oh, I'm not sure about this. I mean, what am I doing? I'm writing just nonsense on this website. I was in that position where I had a job that was quite well paid, but like was totally worthless.
Right.
Like, I mean, I was not doing anything of any worth to the company that was any use to the company or me. I was just sitting there pretending to work, trying to kind of appear busy while, just unwilling to face it. I'm like, I'm just like, oh, I kind of like the money, but like, what am I doing? Like,
Yeah.
So in the end, I was like, okay, well, what if I went to the World Cup instead and kind of covered that? Like I went to the Ireland-Iran game in Iran.
Before, yeah.
But I couldn't do work under my own name because I was supposed to be working for this other crowd in trade, and I didn't want to kind of take the piss out of them, because it's like. So I did cover the Ireland-Iran game, and then I then went to the World Cup, and then once I got back from the World Cup, they were like, yeah, I mean, while you were gone, we sort of figured out we didn't really need you, so like you can go now. I was like, oh, that's fine. So then I started like working for Satanta again, but I didn't do any proper writing until but by 2005 when Vincent Brown, who used to listen to Off the Ball, when he was I don't know, going into RTE at that time, he still would have been doing his radio show on RTE, I guess, and just thought we were good. So he asked me to write some stuff for Village magazine, which he then edited. Village, which obviously has been the thorn in Leo Varadkar's side in the last couple of months. Back then had been started up and was run by Vincent Brown. So I for the next couple of years I kind of wrote football stuff for them.
Right. I'm sensing a thread here of kind of you missing out on huge economic boom times of Amazon and sports betting, but Leo Varadkar's face showing up a little bit along the way. It's kind of
yeah, he kept showing up. Yeah.
But like I saw a quote that you gave. This might have been a Trinity News piece or something about the early days at Off the Ball and when it expanded to 3 hours. And I think it's interesting in terms of what we're chatting about today. You said if you go too basic about how you cover a certain topic in an attempt to attract people who don't care about what you're talking about, then the people who do care about it might not find what you're saying very interesting. There are different levels of expertise with any discussion on any subject. Mm. Were you always analytical in your kind of sports writing and your sports reading? Like, I struggle to think of your writing and not kind of coming away from it learning something, or you kind of breaking something down.
Well, I was kind of always trying to just set out to do something that I might want to read, you know what I mean? Like, which is not, you don't really succeed with that very often, I don't think, like, because I don't really like to read anything that I've written. It was kind of weird having to read back over the stuff that you sent me for this, because I was like, it's not bad actually. But I mean, I don't know, like, I mean, I kind of like to, I would like to always write something that was I always find it much easier to speak than to write. So I'd always like to write something that sounded a bit more like how I might sound if I was speaking about it on like our podcast or a radio show or whatever, because that's kind of what I've mainly been doing in my career, is kind of speaking. But writing is much more difficult and like takes much longer. And you can kind of think of something yeah, that would be good. And then by the time you sort of start writing it down, you're kind of like, what exactly was it I was trying to say there? Or like it's kind of got lost a little bit. So that's kind of what I try to do. I mean, a lot of the stuff, sometimes I find I get like, because writing just takes longer to do, you end up sort of getting a bit too careful with the way you say things, or, well, you have to be more careful as well with the way you say things, because you don't have the intonation to let people know also what it is that you mean. You know what I mean? You can say things in a certain way that people know you mean something slightly different from what it might look like written down. You know what I mean? It's like whereas with writing, you have to try to make an effort to be more clear. It takes longer, and then you can end up being sort of plotting and like, oh God, why have I put in a colon like every like sentence? Like, why are all my sentences like, a statement followed by a colon and then like more stuff. You're like, why am I doing this? Like, this is nonsense. You liked it, but then, like, I mean, if you're at a football match or something, you have to write a match report about it. I mean, this should be really easy, right? There's nothing. This is not like it's not a serious thing to do, right? It's not like, this is not serious. I mean, it is and it isn't.
Yeah.
So ideally, you shouldn't be too serious. It would be good if you could be a little bit funny about what but sometimes it can be difficult to do that, especially if you're under time pressure, or if you're just in a kind of a bad mood, or if you're a little anxious about, you start worrying about stuff and suddenly you can't think of anything. It's weird. I mean, I don't know. So if you're asking me, like, the question was like, I don't really have a set approach. I'm just like, well, what am I interested in about this? Is there anything? Sometimes the tricky thing is like noticing not so much even noticing the interesting thing, but going, oh, that would work. Like, you can notice things and not realize their potential. You know what I mean? You see what I mean? It's like, it's sometimes. I don't know where I've run into a morass with this.
But I know where you're going, and I've been in press boxes with you when, like, all the Irish media sit beside each other, generally kind of in press boxes at World Cups and things like that. And, we all might be filing bang on deadline. And there is much more peace of mind and calm, obviously, when you're filing for Monday's paper from a Saturday game. Obviously, the rush now is for everything to be up online, as it should be. A lot of the time, pretty soon. But nonetheless, when you're on deadline, you can be kind of sitting there thinking, oh, maybe this is really interesting. But actually, given how journalism's changed, and you have your kind of Twitter sidebar open and you just see a tweet that totally goes against, from Opta or something, that totally against what you think you were seeing.
Yeah.
How do you, how do you navigate the absolute live on the whistle reports?
Well, I don't have to do that much of it.
You don't.
I don't really have to do much of that. No, mostly what I'm doing is stuff for Monday. I mean, I do sometimes do that based on games over the weekend, but I mean, say for instance, one of those pieces.
Big game yesterday, right?
Yeah. That was sort of after the game. Yeah, that was like after the game, but say it does make a difference if you have an extra day to work on it. Definitely. Like, I mean, the one that you asked me to read from the Champions League final.
Yes.
From 2018. So that was like a Saturday night game, but that piece was only appearing on Monday. So basically, I had the Sunday to work on it, and it was like, I think it definitely helped, like, in terms of the kind of overall
closer than you
depth of it. Like, you wouldn't be able to. It would be pretty difficult to do that. You'd have to pre-cook a lot of that. You can't really pre-cook something like that. I can never really do that anyway. But yeah, now it does make a difference when you get a little bit longer. But then again, you've got to balance that against the fact that, like, sometimes, like, I mean, you just got to do it. Like, sometimes it's easier to have a deadline soon because it's just like, okay, I mean, I could spend like an extra 10 hours doing this, but it wouldn't necessarily be that much better than if I just had to get it out there. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
To bring up that piece particularly, sorry, it took me a minute to get it up there. I thought I had it already saved. But this is the piece you're talking about that I'd sent to you, because I just thought it was a really good one to kind of just take a quick look at. Well, for a couple of reasons, right? I love, me personally, as an avid Sopranos watcher in my day, but I do love the kind of Sopranos quote as intro and thread to some of the ideas. And this is something that you often do. You often bring your outside interests, I don't want to go as far as to say passions, but your outside interests into your writing, whether it be for perspective or for depth. What do you think of your non-sporting passions, and how do you think they help your sports writing?
Well, I think, like, I kind of just use whatever I have to hand. You know what I mean? So I'm not just saying, oh, like, ultimately we'll end up using what it's all going in. Yeah. Like, it's all just, I just have to throw it all in, whatever it is. Like, it has to go in. So, I mean, the thing about that piece is that I was actually in Kiev at the game. So that is a very precious thing as well, to be there,
Of course.
to kind of have a sense of it. Like it's so much better. I mean, it's a lot of over the last year. I mean, I guess all journalists everywhere have been kind of getting used to this working off TV and so on. I mean, I've done a fair amount of it in my time, but like it's it's nowhere near as good. I'm not saying it's like totally fraudulent. I mean, I think you can cover a sport like football off TV, and you know you see more of the game on TV than you do in the stadium. There's elements that you see in the stadium. I mean, for instance, at these closed stadium games, you can hear oftentimes what's actually being shouted by the players, by the managers. So that's kind of, but you don't usually hear that at a game because it's too loud. There are things that you will notice in a game just because you've got the full view of the stadium that you might miss on TV. But generally, if you're talking about action, what actually happens in the game, you will see it better on TV.
Yeah.
They have more angles they're showing, so you can do it, but it's the whole atmosphere of the thing, and it's also just being there gets you in the sort of state of mind of everybody who's there. Not everybody who's there, it's ridiculous, but you talk to the other journalists who are there, you just get a sense of what the occasion's really like in that piece, like just the total misery of Karius.
That's,
you know what I mean? Or the smugness of Ramos as well, because we'd seen Ramos. Like I saw Ramos coming through the mix zone. Myself and Miguel Delaney were there. He was like the last person through the Madrid mix zone, and the whole toxicity of the Madrid team, like Bale and Ronaldo just talking about how they, I don't get enough respect around here. Ronaldo had this amazing quote, like, "I cannot be sad," and you're like, you've literally just won the Champions League for the 4th time in 5 seasons, and you say, "I cannot be sad."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because he didn't score.
Because he didn't score, and he's standing there saying, "Well, who's the top scorer in this tournament? Like they should call this tournament the CR7 Champions League." And you're like, is this honestly seriously happening? That is something that you don't really get on TV. Like just these guys, you see these Madrid guys going around, and it's like they've won a normal game. They don't even like each other. So it just got a sense of like how sort of humdrum winning the Champions League had become for Real Madrid, how shattered the Liverpool players were, because they thought at that point, that's it, that's our chance. Our chance has just gone. And then Karius is the guy who's thrown it away. And to see him, so all of these things, like definitely your impressions about them all are massively intensified by actually being there. So there isn't ultimately no substitute for going to a game, and with that piece was a bit unusual because you have an extra day to work on a Saturday to Monday, so that's probably why it was better than usual.
What strikes me about that piece, and look, I'm sure that in your in-depth library I could have found a piece that was the opposite of this, but is how prescient so many lines of it are. Like, of course we knew that night was going to be terrible for Karius, but like I say in kind of one of the paragraphs here that I highlighted is how deeply you went into kind of his night and how this will haunt him for wherever he goes. Karius the clown the clown of Kiev. And just looking at his stats, he's made one Bundesliga start this year for Union Berlin. He was lampooned for a mistake every 3 months in Turkey for the last 2 years.
Oh, it was horrific. Like it was beyond horrific. Like for something like that to happen.
You hint at the end of the kind of Real dynasty, and then you also kind of have a flick at Liverpool potentially coming again, and all 3 of those things came to pass. I guess I'm not asking you if you predict these things.
No, I'm the guy who said Amazon was overpriced in 1999. Like, don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about. That doesn't mean, maybe I should keep my mouth shut, but like I've got to make a living like anyone. But don't listen to anything I say.
But maybe this is a good reason to go back and read some of your stuff, because then you can be like, "Oh, I do get it right from time to time."
Stop talking.
If we kind of move on, then I guess one of the pieces that I'd sent out to my class that I really do love is I've got the Guardian version here, but it was originally in 8x8 magazine. And I do want to I have a few different questions about this, but this is a brilliant longer read. I don't know if it's in kind of 3,000 or 4,000 word piece on Steven Gerrard. And this is kind of the crux of what I was getting at in my bit of an intro spiel, but is that this is written in March 2014. I came away from it thinking very differently about Steven Gerrard. And I think that's a very striking thing for, you know, a guy who was at the time kind of, and just had been this huge figure in English football, and you just saw him as a do-all. But what you presented was an argument or kind of an analysis of why his do-all attitude has maybe kind of held him back, and what's behind that do-all attitude. I guess, can you talk to us generally about this piece, how it came about, and what you were hoping to get across? Or did this piece change from the start, from your outset, and what it came to be?
Yeah, and actually that piece, the date on it is March 2014, but it was actually from, I remember writing it out around Christmas of 2013.
Right.
So it was because I'd met the guy who ran 8 by Robert, who ran 8 by 8 in New York. I happened to have been over in New York just on holidays. When this guy kind of got in touch with me. It was around the time, I remember it clearly, because it was when Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane got appointed, surprisingly announced as the new Ireland managerial team. I was in the airport on the way to, or rather had just arrived in America. So I was like, oh Christ, this has been badly timed. But your man said, oh, you know, why don't you write something for the magazine? So it's okay. I was trying to think what I could do. And then I remember at the time it was that Liverpool season, the 2013-14. But remember, it was the first half of that season when they were fairly kind of hit and miss, you know. They were a joke of a team, to be honest. It was how has Luis Suarez ended up in this team?
Right.
Like it's incredible, you know, that this could have happened to him. Like where did it all go wrong? But they started they had a couple of big wins, and I remember that I mentioned they beat Tottenham 5-0. I mean, you know, it was like, and Suarez, remember, was just playing insanely well. They beat Tottenham 5-0, but Gerrard had been injured at the time. So I kind of thought, Gerrard is on the way out here. And actually, this team is beginning to look as good as it has done in years. And he's not in it now. You know what I mean? And actually what happened, and so that was kind of at the point at which I was writing, it was kind of like, he's sort of finished now, and this is what I think about him. It was kind of written from that sort of perspective. But what actually happened was that he came back into the team, playing in the position where I said he couldn't really play, as a sort of a midfield, you know, as kind of a directing midfield player. Played really well. They won was it 11 games in a row? They were going to win the league, and then obviously it culminated with his. It culminated with him falling over the slip, which was just incredible. But I remember watching it going, well, I mean, I've said all this stuff about, I was feeling a bit like, you know, first Amazon, now Stevie G. Is there anything that I can't get wrong? But and then the slip, I mean, brought me no pleasure. I mean, I don't think that he really, I think he's a really exceptional footballer who managed to adapt because he basically couldn't run around anymore. He literally just couldn't do it. And he sort of was able to adapt ultimately to playing this way. But he was only able to adapt when he literally could not. It wasn't he couldn't force himself to do it. He had to be forced to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And anyway, nearly it could have been a great culmination for him. But
I know, look, your nature is to kind of joke about the fact that you got so much of this wrong, and yet, you know, what strikes me is this paragraph, which I really like, which is Gerard devotes a couple of pages of his autobiography to the David Ginola ordeal. This is his debut, where he got kind of roasted by David Ginola when he was playing on the right-hand side of midfield. And you kind of dig into anxiety being a constant companion of Gerard. And this is the kind of paragraph here. Anxiety has been Gerard's constant companion. You see it in his play. He told his teammates in Istanbul, make every challenge count, every run count, every shot count. Otherwise, you will fucking regret it for the rest of your lives. It could be the motto of his career. Everything has to count, or he has to let everyone down. The 30-yard shots that fly into the net and the 30-yard passes that fly into the stands are expressions of the same impulse. He has no patience. He's desperate to make something happen every time he gets the ball. And often he succeeds. In a sense, this battle with anxiety is what made him the spectacular player he became.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, actually.
Came out, you know, 4 weeks removed from the defining moment of his career, which was a little bit of anxiety, potentially a little bit of trying to do too much by, like, he could have just, people have overanalyzed the slip so much, and I don't want to get into analyzing the slip right now. But there are so many aspects, even in that one paragraph, that kind of came to play 4 or 5, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like I remember someone saying to me, his personality is like the scenery in Frankenstein. You know, it's all like, you know, brooding cliff faces, like, you know, boundless forests, you know,
Yeah.
lightning bolts and all this kind of nonsense. It's never just like easy. So like in that game, I remember he obviously fell over. I mean, it was just one of those things. I mean, it's just that it happens at such a moment is incredible. And after he's like literally like on the nose he foreshadowed it by saying this does not slip the previous week. I mean, it's just unbelievable that this could happen. But then he kind of, you know, obviously he knew, oh no, this is it. Like it's going to be my fault that this doesn't, you know, that we don't win the league, which is crazy because they all thought they were going to win it. And I think he had 9 shots then. It was just like, it just became this complete one man. I've got us into this mess. I'm going to get us out of it, you know. And he was just like desperately just firing the ball at goal from wherever he could get it. And, you know, just again, like maybe if at that point, if you're able to show a little bit of patience, but like his way of making things happen was always, I've got to do it myself. Like,
Yes.
you know, I've got to just do it. Like no one else is going to do it. Look at, like, have you seen who I'm playing with? So, and that's the way that it was for a lot of the time when he was there. Yeah, but it was, yeah. I mean, he's a pretty interesting character. Like he's much more interesting, I think, than Lampard, for instance. He was like his sort of contemporary and rival, you know, and he was just, I don't want to say like a machine, but I mean, he kind of was like, you know, but comparatively robotic, sort of, you know, successful, high achiever, you know. Gerrard is like this tormented, like more interesting person to write about.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting to look back on it. 2014 shouldn't and doesn't at times seem like that long ago. It's only 7 years, and yet, you know,
it's a long time.
It can feel
a long time.
Like to kind of touch on another piece. I've stopped sharing my screen right now, but one of the other pieces was from mid 2019 on kind of a piece in the Irish Times on football's new age, neutralizing the philosophies of the past. And something that does strike me is, and this kind of feeds into a quote that you also gave to the Trinity News in 2018 about statistics and their place in the game. Not that your entire 2019 piece is built on statistics, but how much has your approach to writing and particularly analysis writing changed between 2014 and 2021?
Yeah, I mean, a huge amount, because you do have all of this extra kind of numerical information about what's going out in the pitch, and it's kind of like, if you can ignore it if you want, but like others won't, and you'll be wrong, you know. not that you'll be wrong. I mean, everyone's always wrong all the time pretty much, but if you can't just sort of pretend this stuff isn't happening. Like, did you see Jack Grealish recently talking about like his expected assists?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
You saw that?
Yeah.
Like, Grealish is like, oh, you know, my and like Grealish, like he's such a total like, I am a football star, like, you know, the hair and like his whole look, like he's just an absolute like football like himbo, you know. And but here he is like speaking completely about like, well, you know, my expected assists, and he's comparing, because it's competitive, because like they're able to see a list, and they're able to see where they are on the list. They know everyone else can see where they are on the list as well, so they want to be at the top of the list. And he sees Kevin De Bruyne at the top, and he's like, well, okay, if De Bruyne is on top, then this list is worth being at the top of. Expected assists, what exactly is it? And then he figures it out. It's like, oh, right, that's when I should have set up goals and my teammates aren't putting them away. Okay, that's a good one. You know, I'll remember that. But like players are, you know, you saw Maddison. Maddison gave that interview to Sky after a recent game.
Yeah.
James Maddison, the Leicester player, where he talked about seeing Carragher on TV saying he's got to get his numbers up, you know, and Maddison sitting down with like Rodgers and the analysis guys at Leicester saying, look, you know, what am I going to do? Like, because, you know, you can be sort of, you get lots of, like Keane and Souness, for instance, I mentioned in that piece, they'll be like, oh, stats, you know, stats don't matter, and there's no stats. I never saw a stat score a goal. I'm like, they're just missing the point. Like, they're, you know, they don't understand it. It wasn't part of the game when they were playing, and so they think it can't have any relevance. But like it does, like, you know, I mean, in the world that these players are living in. I mean, don't forget they also all grew up playing computer games as well. I mean, how insane is it that Diogo Jota is like the best FIFA player in the world, as well as being like as a yeah. Did you see, like, Diogo Jota is like the number one ranked FIFA player. Or, you know, I mean, I'm sure the rankings probably change. He probably doesn't, like, maybe now that he's not injured, he's not playing quite as much FIFA. Maybe someone's managed to knock him off the top. But he is like an absolute he's probably better at FIFA, like David Myler. I don't know if David Myler is like is quite as good at Jota. He's not as good at, yeah, well, look, you know, whatever. He's a fine player. He was a fine player. But like, I think it's kind of crazy. But I mean, it's interesting, like, because it suggests, okay, there's some similarity to what's being measured here, like, you know, in terms of like the football being a game you play with your brain, you know, it's just interesting he's so good at both of them. But if you grew up playing these games, as like basically everybody now does, you're sort of already used to thinking about players in terms of them being like a set of numbers, you know what I mean? Like, in, you know, in terms, like, you see players doing it every year when they post their FIFA, oh, my FIFA, oh, they've given me like 72 pace, like, what's all that about, you know? And so they're naturally thinking about naturally thinking about it in this way anyway. I mean, it's just that it's not just to do with football. Obviously, like, football is a clear example of something like this, where you've got this like net that's being cast over it of numbers, which are now, you know, just data points. Everything is now data point, and you can record it all, and you can compare it to how it was yesterday and how it was last year, and, you know, that's kind of the situation that we face in all different walks of life. I mean, I'm not saying this is a good thing. Like, I mean, you know, a lot of people have. It's not just Graham Souness, like, who is kind of looking at this, going, "There's something I really don't like about this." You know, you can go back to, like, is it that Keats poem Lamia or whatever? You know, unweaving the rainbow. All this kind of this whole idea of like, oh, they're trying to ruin everything. These science people are just trying to take all the mystery out of life, take the mystery out of things, and that's true. It does demystify. Like, I mean, I suppose but it just it's still, in the case of football, it's still the same basic competitive activity. Like, it's still basically Grealish wants to be thought of as being better than De Bruyne, but unlike in the past, he has got ways to do that, which he doesn't have to, like, dominate him one-on-one in a game. He doesn't have to kick him or, like, open his leg up with his studs. He doesn't have to do, like, some tough guy profile interview in the media where he, like, develops a sort of a cult around himself. He can just do it by, like, playing well in every game, and then, like, everyone will be like, well, you know, objectively, his XGA is above De Bruyne's, you know.
And that's something about statistics is the quote I think that struck me, again, this was 2018, and I think things have sped up even since then, as you say, that level of statistical analysis only happens now because it can happen now, as in because all this stuff has been tracked.
You couldn't measure it. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I guess to kind of speak to how you use it, or to make it kind of even more useful for the guys, because I know we've got a bunch of questions coming in, and I do want to kind of get onto the guys. Like, how would you recommend exposing yourself to that kind of data that you use or that you find useful? Like, for the guys here in the class, like, what sources do you go to? What would be kind of good places that you could point to?
Well, the best sort of open, because there's lots of different sort of stats, you know, football stats groups, but lots of them are like, you know, you have to pay for, like, Y Scout, or, you know, they're sort of targeted at professional clients. So they could be either like professional people working in football clubs, you know, or whatever, or media companies. Like, some media companies will pay, like, Opta or whatever, to have access to, like, all Opta's stuff. You know, if you look at, like, The Athletic or something like that, they've obviously got access to decent studio stats. But there's also, like, some good sort of open source stuff. So I think one of the best ones at the moment is called FBref, which I guess means football reference, or fbref.com, which uses data from StatsBomb. And, like, it's pretty, you know, it's pretty good. It's pretty thorough. Again, you can see, like, the really detailed information they have only goes back like 4 seasons now, I think. But that's because it's only that long ago since they're sort of measuring this. I mean, you know, they have more basic stats going back probably for the Premier League era, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I think like you can see if you look at say the who's talking about like Premier League football, stats are very big, particularly with the Americans. But
Yeah.
that I think has something to do with the Atlantic. You know what I mean? Like the fact is, like if you're an American in America, like how else are you going to do this? You know, how else are you going to be able to talk about it? Like you can't sort of go and hang out in like the tunnel and like hear what's been said in the mix zone, or you know, so you can't do those things. So you have to, if you want to do it, you sort of have to lean on the things you can do. And to be fair, the way that it's going, like the way that football clubs are going, each gradually transforming into its own little media channel, which is what they're doing.
Yeah.
What they don't need the media anymore to sort of transmit stuff about the club through their traditional channels of newspapers, radio, TV. They don't need that anymore. They can do it themselves. They've got everything they need to do it themselves. The same way, like every individual has got everything they need to broadcast themselves. You know, just using a phone or whatever, and like social media. So the clubs don't need journalists anymore really talks to, and so the access to the players, which is the valuable thing the clubs control, it's only the clubs who get that now. You know what I mean? The clubs do their own little YouTube videos with their players and like and obviously the interviews are all super friendly. Like it's obviously PR type stuff. Not that it wasn't usually that as well in the past, but it always is now. The access to players is just being cut down. At least for the players who are actually actively in the game. I mean, players who are out of the game are probably, journalists can talk to them because they're not in demand anymore. But if you're an American and you're separated by thousands of miles of ocean from this scene physically, like going to games and so on, then it's quite natural that you would look at what you can access. Not just an American, anyone else anywhere in the world. I'm just saying lots of the stats guys seem to be American, and it's kind of a thing. Oh, we know that. I mean, they're the ones who invented this after all in sport. Like they started doing it with. I mean, there was the guy Reap who did it in soccer, but like some kind of eccentric guy sitting there writing stuff down or like making marks on paper and assembling like big sheaves of paper which then sit in his attic. Like that's no use to anybody. Nobody can access that information. Nobody can use it. Whereas it's the kind of Americans who have driven this like quantification of the game. So like I mean, you might not like that they've done it, but they have done it. And it is, I don't think it's something that any journalist who seriously wants to cover the sport can now ignore. I mean, you might not like it, but there it is.
Yeah, sure. So we have a few questions came in the chat, and then the guys can kind of turn on their cameras and put their hands up or whatever. I think that might be fine because it's not too huge of a group. I guess just the one, rather than going in order, one that speaks to what you were just talking about from Mike Finnerty, which is more specific on which manager do you think is most responsible for the boom in stats-based culture? Guardiola, Klopp, someone else?
I don't think either of those really are stats guys, actually. Like, yeah, I don't think either of them are, because Klopp didn't use them at all. Like at Dortmund, he didn't use them at all. He's like completely I don't think he's really that interested in stats. He's interested in the kind of emotional state of the players more than anything. I mean, I think he's obviously interested in tactics. Guardiola is like a super tactics guy, but I don't think it's really about statistics, because he developed that whole outlook that he has, that he brought to his work as Barcelona manager in 2008, pre-2008. I mean, this this entire period is more recent than that. You know what I mean? In 2008, like, you didn't have any useful statistics. I mean, you had very little that would change it, that would be capable of changing a manager's thinking about a game. You could, the ability to measure what players did was still pretty limited. So I don't think either of them are. I mean, I don't know if it's the managers that are responsible for it in any case, so much as this is just the way the world is now. Like the TV companies clearly do it. I mean, it's like Sky wanting to have something to like talk about in like the bits between football. Yeah, is as much as anything. It's like, oh, look, Opta have developed some new stats for us to look at. Like, what about this? And of course, every time a new stat comes along, you get this sort of, what's this? Like, big chances created. Like, what's a big chance? That's a bad example. Everyone knows what a big chance is. Although, what is it by definition? I'm not actually sure. But
funny
but
because a heat map is almost not twee or old fashioned now, but you see heat maps used more as memes than
it's just it's a shape of whatever. No, so I think it's probably. I think it's probably the media, but also the fact that the media is aware that clubs have been doing this. Like, I mean, probably the main person who brought it into English football, or the person who's responsible for English football and the media around it starting to take it seriously is John Henry, the Liverpool owner.
Right.
But because of that past with in baseball, because of the fact that when he took over, there was this real sort of, we're going to be the smartest guys in the room sort of thing. And like, he was this kind of guy with glasses, thinking he's real smart, like make lots of money, like betting on futures or whatever in the market. And it was like, oh, this guy, if he's half as smart as he thinks he is, looks like Liverpool are going to, have a lot of success. And there was this whole Moneyball thing. I mean, like Moneyball is Michael Lewis book from 2003, I think, that kind of was the first to sort of mainstream this story having happened in baseball. And so it's a treatment of that. Like, I mean, so they're like, we're going to try and do this in football, which led to a debate about, well, can you do that in football? Surely it might be fine in a simple sport like baseball, which is just a bunch of guys standing around scratching their ass. But football is a much better sport than that, which is much more difficult to measure and to manipulate and to break down. And so that kind of created an ongoing debate, let's say, which first of all, Liverpool were losing, and everyone was having a good laugh. But then after a while, it seemed as though they, for the first time in 20, 30 years, they started signing players who were good or who seemed to play well. And it was like, well, maybe they are, and the fact is that Premier League clubs, whatever like sort of media pundits are saying, are always going to try and see if they think that other teams are doing stuff which helps them. Then they're going to try. I mean, Sam Allardyce was doing this, sort of before there was John Henry. You can just imagine Sam Allardyce, how angry he'd be to hear John Henry getting the credit when he was the one who first looked at Prozone. He was the one who first started to break down, the game into these ways. So, there's always been that sort of interest in how, is it something we can do that will help us to get better. So if you're looking for a manager, actually, let's say Sam Allardyce. But I think if you're looking for an individual who really is most responsible for this boom, as the question says, then it probably will be John Henry.
Okay, that's super interesting. A question from earlier from Kira, which was when we were kind of talking, I guess when you were speaking specifically about writing as you talk. But which medium do you prefer, podcast or traditional journalism? But more kind of pertinently, do you think the podcast industry will rise more in popularity than, say, traditional journalism? It may well already have.
Yeah, I mean, it's like... do you mean podcasts or like traditional radio? Is that what the question means?
More likely kind of traditional kind of written word media. But Kira's she can kind of join in if you want. Guys, you can all turn on your cameras and put up your hands if you want, whatever suits.
I think that it's much like I find it much easier to speak than to write. But people have different attitudes. Some very good writers I can think of. Say for instance, Brian Phillips. I don't know if you know that guy.
Are both now at.
I'm not sure who he's working for now. I mean, he had a book out quite recently. But he's written some absolutely phenomenal football pieces over the years. But I remember talking to or asking him to come on the podcast a couple of times, and he kind of wouldn't do it. And I was kind of like, I don't know. I mean, and I've had this sometimes with people who are very, very good writers, that maybe they kind of feel as though if they talk, they might express themselves as they would like. If if you're used to like writing like really good pieces, and then suddenly you go on podcasts and start saying a bunch of stuff.
Nonsense.
Maybe I don't know. I don't even know that. Maybe he just didn't like our podcast. Who knows? But like, I find it better. I find it easier to just talk than to write. Writing is much more mentally intensive. But in terms of like, I think the difference between podcasts and radio, which is what I worked in before, is the tight control of time that you have at radio. So, with radio, you've got to be conscious of going to ads every few minutes, or there's news at a certain time. You're going to have to wrap up an item. It can't go into the next hour. Blah blah blah. Like which is good and bad. Like, so you can hear the way that I've given like super long answers to loads of these questions. Just like going blah blah blah, and it can be good to just have a bit more discipline than that. Like, you see the way there are podcasts which are like 3 hours long or whatever. It seems to be like a kind of thing, like 3 hours, like really. But I think they're not really meant to be kind of listened to the whole way through. It's just, tune in, tune out. Like, but definitely the time constraints of radio imposed a bit of a discipline, which made things a bit tighter. But it's obviously a disadvantage as well, because you can actually go more in depth into things. Obviously, if you don't have to be finished by a certain time. So I think that does allow for actually more interesting conversations. It can do, but it can also allow for like conversations that get lost in their own self-importance and just meander into it. Like, everyone's like bored to tears, going, why am I doing this? So
it gives you a pretty good opportunity to change your mind, or kind of day to day to realize you were wrong. I think kind of sometimes quite funny. And
does anyone ever do that, show? I mean,
Stephen Gerrard at Rangers been, you said this won't work, and it has worked, and
okay, I did.
But equally, I kind of think it's quite funny. Anyone who's listened to the Monday, is this just a Six Nations thing? The Monday mini pods, they're like 10 minutes long, and I get the feeling that like you're kind of just motoring, and the boys go, right, so that's great, and you're like, huh, what? I haven't even kind of warmed up.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got it's all part of the commercial model. I mean, will the podcast industry rise more in popularity than traditional journalism? I mean, again, I'm not sure what you mean by traditional journalism. If you mean like the radio, I mean, I guess it's sort of already the case. I mean, it's just a reflection of the technology, so you used to have to listen, you could only broadcast radio using you would need a bunch of things, like a studio, a bunch of expensive equipment, a big mast in the mountains beaming out signal, and then everybody listening needed to have a kind of a little radio machine, sitting in their kitchen counter or like in their car. Whereas now, basically, everybody just has the same thing, which is a phone, and you can both broadcast and listen using the phone. And in fact, it's easier to listen to like a kind of or to tune into some digital thing than like it's harder to actually find if you want to listen to a radio station, you probably have to tune into it digitally now. You know what I mean? As opposed to, I mean, maybe you can listen in your car, or as opposed to like FM radio or something. But like, so it's just kind of reflecting the ease of that. Like, all of the barriers that used to exist to becoming a broadcaster, which used to be enormous. Like, not only did you need the equipment and so on, but you also had to, in order to do it legally, you had to get like a license from the government. You know what I mean? You could have a pirate station. People used to do that. But like, the police might come and shut you down. Whereas now, like, literally anybody can do that. I mean, maybe nobody will watch.
I think, look, there's a few of the guys in our class, if you want to kind of even tap into Ken's podcast knowledge, who have their own podcasts going. I think in Toronto, where I live, I'm the only white guy without a podcast.
Well, that's like, people used to have diaries, now they have podcasts. I mean, the fact is, like, the thing about diaries is, like, supposedly reading someone's diary is like a big, you should never do it, but that's nonsense. Like, the diary was there to be read, otherwise you wouldn't like write it. It was there to be read, so somebody eventually would pick it up and read and realize that you were vindicated, in all these ways. Like, so maybe now it's just replace that. Like, I mean, it's cheaper than therapy, and it's basically the same. You just sit there talking, and like, no, maybe someone's listening, but you don't have to pay this time. So I don't know, but you can see in the mass popularity of it, like, it's not just because people expect to be successful, people just want to talk.
Yeah, I think for not just for the purposes of cross-brand promotion, but David O'Doherty's isolating was a great sign of that. Great example of that. Someone processing their thoughts just in their car. A couple other questions there. They're kind of quite sports specific, but they're good to kind of to get your take on. One was, where does Gerard rank in the terms of best Premier League midfielder of all time? Is he below, above Vieira, Keane, Lampard, De Bruyne, etc.?
I think Vieira and Keane are probably above him. All of these players are more successful than him in terms of have they won the league title.
Mm.
Did Vieira win PFA Player of the Year? Don't think he did.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure Lampard did. Lampard definitely won Football Writers Player of the Year. I mean, look, the individual awards don't measure anything. De Bruyne and Keane both won PFA award. I think that he is. I would put him ahead of Lampard, on a par with De Bruyne, and maybe behind Vieira and Keane.
Yeah. That's it. You're breaking the hearts. I think half of my class are Liverpool fans, but we should wrap up in the next 10 minutes. But what are your thoughts on Rovers, Shamrock Rovers, and Dundalk now being sponsored by betting companies? This is interesting in a League of Ireland perspective, but obviously in a wider perspective, which is given the scrutiny surrounding gambling and football's relationship with gambling at the moment. That's from Joseph. Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's unfortunate. It reflects maybe a certain, well, you know, what else is out there, kind of thing, from Rovers and Dundalk. The FAI, I noticed, had have said that they're not going to have a gambling sponsor anymore, which I think is a good move. I mean, the fact is, you can see, you know, that it's the case across almost every country where you have legal gambling advertising, that it dominates advertising of football. You know, Spain is no different, I think, from what we're seeing sort of in the UK or in Ireland. I mean, you are seeing, for instance, a pretty different approach at Bohemians at the moment.
Yeah.
So they've kind of gone a totally, like, they've got Fontaine's DC on their away shirt.
Yeah.
You know, and they've got it's sort of interesting what they're
to raise money for homelessness in Middlesbrough, right?
Yeah, so they've kind of tried to go about it more indirectly rather than just taking the money. Like they're sort of they're hoping to sort of stand for something good, which I imagine they hope will then translate into you know, that the money will come back to them in a certain way, like a kind of a more karma based approach. I'm not sure. Like, I mean, on the one hand, like if it's legal, which it is, like it's I think to sort of point the finger at Shamrock Rovers and Dundalk and say, well, you shouldn't have done this. I mean, these are teams that like are struggling for money. Maybe Dundalk less so. I mean, Dundalk obviously have got a big blob of capital that owns them. They've obviously the situation for the clubs is very bad at the moment with the closures of the stadiums and so on. So I kind of feel as though it would be a bit like, you know, to point the finger to them, say, you're a disgrace, what are you doing? Like, the fact is, gambling is legal here. The advertising of gambling is legal here. Our culture is saturated with it. Like, we're about to have Cheltenham is still on, is it? I mean, I don't really follow it. It's on this week. It's this week. It is, right? That's when it should be.
Tuesday the first day, Tuesday through Friday, I think.
Yeah, and which is just like this massive like orgy of gambling. I mean, that's kind of been, that's the way that we've let things get here. So what I'm saying is, Shamrock Rovers and Dundalk are simply saying, okay, you know, we're a football club's in need of money. These guys are the best offer on the market, so we'll take it. And you know, it's not as though they're unaware that, like, I'm sure that if they had the option to have a non-gambling sponsor who would give them an equal amount of money, then they probably take that. You know what I mean? But like, they're kind of like, well, like, what, you know, why should we forego this money if apparently it's all legal here? You know what I mean? Like, it's not up to Shamrock Rovers and Dundalk really to decide. It's up to the government to decide. Yeah. Like, does the government think it's okay that our culture is saturated with messages to gamble? Is that okay? Apparently, yes. Apparently, that's what our government thinks is fine. So if that's what they're saying, then the likes of Rovers and Dundalk, they obviously have the choice to do what, say, Bows are doing. They have the option to do that, but this is a kind of, you know, I can sort of see, like, it's a realistic approach that they've taken to the current commercial. Yeah. Should this advertising be legal? I don't think it should be, but it's not a problem that Shamrock Rovers can solve simply by saying we're not going to have a gambling sponsor. You know what I mean? In that case, some other club will say, well, we will have a gambling sponsor, and you know, that's bad news for Shamrock Rovers.
Yeah, I think we're 2 years removed from a Premier League season where 11 of the 20 clubs were sponsored by gambling companies.
Yeah.
And just I know we're here for your perspective, but from my perspective, I've been in Canada now 5.5 years. Sports gambling is illegal here. And they have these kind of prop bets that you can do, but interestingly, it's coming around the corner. There's legislation in front of the Canadian Parliament right now to legalize it, but they're looking at the saturation of gambling advertising as one of the things they want to avoid. And the one thing that strikes me, not that I'm advocating streaming matches illegally, but the odd time if I can't find a game and I'm streaming a game off Reddit and it's the British broadcast, I cannot get over how many ads during the ad commercial breaks are telling you to put money on Aubameyang to score next.
Well, the whole thing, yeah, and Ray Winstone and Clive Owen, it's big business. I mean, sure, I used to work for a gambling company. I was telling you already. So, it was a long time ago. But yeah, it's bad, but this is apparently it's fine. Apparently it's fine. That's what our government is saying at the moment. So I guess these clubs are taking their cue from that, and really the efforts to change it should not be directed at just sort of shaming clubs for doing what the sort of law says is okay to do. You know what I mean? But rather at the government for saying this is okay.
For sure. I'm just interested, any of the rest of the guys, turn on your camera, ask a question if you want. Anything else specific to, I guess, kind of the theme of the class, which was sports writing, or indeed anything sports specific for Ken? Just stare into the distance here. Forlornly. If you don't, there we go.
I might jump in there, yeah. I suppose it's just on podcasting and I suppose in the early days of it, what's the best way to grow, aside from the obvious, I suppose, thing of advertising and all that. What do you think is the best way to grow a podcast? Myself and one of the lads there, Aidan, are doing a League of Ireland podcast at the moment. We're 8 episodes in, but we're just trying to get up the audience, I suppose, and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I would say, first of all, you just have to keep doing it, because it's kind of takes a while for anything to sort of get going like that, and that's really the main obstacle. But in terms of getting other people to listen, I mean, you can one way is to kind of speak to people who already have a bigger platform. You know what I mean? Or to speak to people who people might be interested in hearing from,
Guests are a big way, yeah.
Yeah, there isn't, oh God, it's hard to think of how else, because how else do you do it? I mean, I find it difficult to sort of, the way that I did it was by being on a radio station for 11 years, and there was only a couple of radio stations people could listen to, so they were forced to listen to me for a decade, and then at the end of it, so I can't really advise. I mean, it would be great. It'd be great if everybody could do that, but it's kind of nobody can do that anymore. It's quite unfair. But in turn, so without the captive audience, it's much harder to grow an audience. So, but I think that probably is really the only way, just to get on people who people might be interested in listening to. I mean, the thing is, people don't really share audio clips as much as other sorts of. Although I don't know if you may not just be audio. You see lots of podcasts now are kind of. Do you do video as well?
No, we're audio for the moment anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's although I don't really I don't see why anyone would share necessarily a video of a podcast any more than just an audio clip, because they're usually quite boring visually. It's just heads talking to each other. Yeah, I mean that's really all I can say. But the main thing is just to keep doing it, because people get into it's a kind of a repetition. I mean that's how you will get good at doing it, and how people will sort of get used to listening to you. Repetition is important. So. Yeah, just keep. Get guests. I mean, I don't know. It's possible to get guests of surprising quality, I suppose.
Yeah.
You can kind of make decisions. Oh, they never want to talk to me, but sometimes they do. So.
Yeah, you don't ask, you don't get, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
12 months, right? Like in the last 12 months, people have, because everyone's doing things remotely and distance like this, you can kind of, everyone's a bit more open to kind of just jumping on a call.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Thanks very much, Anna. Cheers.
No, best of luck.
We got another one there from Aidan. Oh God, every bloody Irish football conversation has to have at least one Roy Keane and Celtic element. So maybe not tie the two. Roy Keane to Celtic thoughts.
I hope he does it. I mean, it will be interesting to see. Like, I think he kind of has to do it really for his self-respect, because I was looking at him recently and I was thinking, like, it was just a few weeks ago, and he was slagging off some people, and I can't remember who it was. He was attacking whoever it was. He was attacking that weekend, and I was kind of looking at him going, I can't believe that you have never even managed Celtic. Yeah. Like, it's kind of incredible. Like, Neil Lennon's had 2 goes.
Yeah.
And you are sitting in this studio. Like, it is a sort of a loss to punditry, because he is extremely funny as a pundit.
Oh, super.
Like, he's so funny. Like, but I mean, he doesn't say anything of any real insight. Hardly ever. Maybe he sometimes, but like in terms of football, like, he barely ever makes a point. It's always just like picking a victim to eviscerate. There's always going to be someone who he can go for, and then I think a lot of what he's doing is for comic effect. Like, I mean, I think that maybe I'm wrong. Maybe like sometimes he actually gets he makes himself angry by like talking. He starts talking about something, and then he thinks about Saipan, and then he starts getting angry. But like, as a manager, like, I'm just kind of like, how could this approach possibly work as managing a team? Like, how could it's only really been successful in one season, his first season at Sunderland, when he was managing a team in the Championship, and he was at that point like maybe the biggest star in the English game. Like, he'd been the captain of Man United throughout, like, for the previous decade, or 12 and a half years actually. Won all these titles, had been like the best player in the league, was kind of one of the most charismatic and sort of interesting people in the league. And then now here he was being a manager. And like, I think the players just kind of thought he was a god, you know what I mean? And it was only when they started getting used to him.
Like, he'd been Dwight York, maybe not that season, but yeah, it was that season.
Yeah, I think it was. Carlos Edwards, I remember, was amazing for him, and he had like a few sort of decent players, but like they just played brilliantly for him. I think everyone just kind of was like, wow, we can't believe Roy Keane is our manager. But this sort of, after a while, they got used to him. Then they kind of like, oh, he would insult people a lot, and sort of kind of got a bit abusive at times. And didn't he got the goal. He said his goalkeepers were so bad. I'll do better than you. Like, give me the gloves, and like challenging his goalkeepers to saving competitions and training. It's like, shouldn't do that. Like, I mean, so.
Or the Clive Clark thing. The Clive Clark thing, I think if that happened in 2021, would be a whole other.
Oh, well, that was a disgrace.
I think still to this day, maybe if some of the younger ones in the crowd don't know, but in the group here don't know, but Clive Clark, one of his players, who had a heart attack, correct?
He had a cardiac arrest. Anyway, he was playing. He was on loan. It wasn't in a game when Keane was actually the manager. Like, he didn't stand there over Clive Clark's unconscious body and say, it was Clark was on loan for some other team, and this had happened. He'd had a cardiac arrest, and obviously, had been taken to hospital, and thankfully he was okay. But obviously it's terrifying. You've seen players die in that situation. And Keane's comment was like, oh, I'm surprised they found a heart. Wasn't that it? It was a line like that. And you're kind of like, that's like, I can't say, like, something, that person has got a serious loss of perspective. Like, that's no good. So someone who would say something like that,
I just wonder how someone who could say something like that then is going to survive in 2021. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that if you can't go up to Celtic and win silverware, whether that's the league or not, like that, it's almost like he needs to do that before he's completely finished as a manager.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, how can he, like, he hasn't worked as a manager since 2012, is it? Like, that's a really long time.
Yeah.
You know, he's been like yeah, I mean, Sunderland and Ipswich was really a failure. Like, you know, it just never took off.
Mhm.
So his management career has been a disaster, and his punditry career is brilliant. Like he gets like 1 million views on YouTube. Everything he does, like, you know, he just, and you know, Mick and Richards is laughing, and you know, and Keane is kind of glinting, his eyes glinting a little bit, and he says something terrible about someone else. But like always, his analysis of it is like, yeah, you know, they don't want it enough, or you know, they're it's because of some failing, some weakness in their character or personality. Like they're just not a good enough human being to have won that game, and that's kind of his attitude. And I kind of feel as though that's probably pretty much the way he manages the team as well when he's managing. You know, the problem here is that you people are just no good, you know. So I just don't think that's really that productive. But like, that's not to say it's not entertaining.
Yeah.
Like, you know what, if he, yeah, so
it may well prove to be just what's needed in Glasgow. Unless anyone else has any more questions, I'm gonna thank Ken. Any questions, guys? No questions. No. So I just want to say big cheers to Ken, and thanks for coming in and joining us. And I think like the guys will have got a hell of a lot out of that, particularly to get all of their terrible articles out of the way while they're a student.
yeah,
That's
no shame. No one remembers. Well, people will remember.
People will remember because now everything's online.
Yeah,
we were young.
Yeah.
But no, I really appreciate it, mate. It's been great to chat and to chat more football, and a bit no more than. Oh wait, do we have another one? These are probably just people saying thank you. You know, I think it's a bit like an episode of Second Captains. We could go on for hours, but we won't, because I've got the rest of my class to chat to, and myself and yourself will catch up sometime soon, man. I appreciate it.
Cool. Good to see you, Joe.
Thanks.
Good to talk to everybody.
For the rest of my students, it's 1:15, so maybe at 1:30 we'll pick up back in the other chat, and we will pick up the rest of this class and dissect what we learned today from Ken, which is mostly don't take financial advice. Cheers, guys.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.